to late in the third quarter, you guys were struggling offensively in that frame. Second half in general didn't feel the same as the first half on that end. Did something change for you guys? What did you see as kind of leading to stalling on that end?
Yeah, I think we were just kind of slow. And every time that we're slow, especially defensively, it just somehow affects our...
Sophie Cunningham didn't sugarcoat her feelings after this one, and honestly, she had every reason not to hold back. The Indiana Fever just fumbled away a game they absolutely should have won, falling 88-84 to a Washington Mystics squad that sits near the bottom of the standings. Indiana at one point held a double-digit lead and even went into halftime still in command, but everything flipped when Washington came out with a devastating 22-7 third-quarter run that completely turned momentum. With playoff positioning directly on the line, this painful loss knocked the Fever down into 7th place, intensifying the pressure with only a handful of games left.
Overhead is Cunningham with a steal. Cunningham feeds Sims, who goes coast to coast and lays it in.
So they had to make sure they had the right shot clock time as well while they were reviewing that.
So Indiana with a 10-point lead here, 6 minutes until halftime as Boston finds some space and knocks it down. Now Sims launches ahead for Mitchell. What a pass by Odyssey.
The Fever looked firmly in control early, building a commanding 13-point advantage during the second quarter with a 40-27 lead. At that point, it seemed like they were on cruise control toward a comfortable win. But just as quickly as the cushion was built, it was erased. Washington roared back with a punishing 22-7 surge that not only tied things up but completely silenced the Indiana crowd. Suddenly, the Mystics were playing with confidence, shooting a scorching 52% from the field and knocking down timely three-pointers, while Indiana's offense stalled and became stagnant.
Buckeyes.
Here is the Buckeye product on the backdoor pass, but Mitchell lost the handle. Sutton thought about the three, steps in, Hull got a piece. Dolson has been wide open all possession, splashes home a three, and we are level at 40.
What made that swing sting even more was that it wasn't some superstar takeover driving the Mystics' rally. Instead, it was Indiana's complete loss of composure. Turnovers started piling up, defensive breakdowns happened possession after possession, and instead of steadying the game, the Fever unraveled. Indiana racked up 21 fouls, handing Washington a staggering 26 free throw opportunities. Every careless turnover, every late rotation, every missed assignment turned into another free trip to the line, chipping away at the lead play-by-play.
Sims with 5 off the bench. Indiana has 8 first-quarter bench points. That's typically been a strength when they're playing well, as Iriafen just bullies her way inside. Now Citron being guarded by Lexi Hull. Hull goes over the screen, defends her really well. Citron just has to fire it up, and a circus shot for Citron.
Adding insult to injury, it was Washington's rookies who punished Indiana the most. Sonia Citron played with composure well beyond her years, dropping 21 points, while Kiki battled her way to 18 points and 12 rebounds, dominating the paint and crashing the offensive glass for crucial second-chance opportunities. These weren't empty stat lines either, they directly shifted momentum, keeping possessions alive and breaking Indiana's defensive spirit. For a Fever team fighting for a playoff spot, sitting precariously in 7th place, letting 2 young players take over and dismantle their lead was about as costly as it gets.
Why at the same time? Because I'm you and you're me. We switch bodies. Zub's in the chat! Ah!
It's not as if Indiana didn't have bright spots individually. Aaliyah Boston was excellent in the paint, powering her way to 20 points and 9 rebounds, the kind of steady production that normally anchors a win. Kelsey Mitchell facilitated well in the first half, creating chances and setting the pace. Sophie Cunningham brought her trademark intensity, while Lexi Hull delivered strong defensive effort across her minutes. The core worked hard, they played with energy, and they didn't quit even as the tide turned. That's what makes this loss so bitter. The downfall wasn't about effort or players not showing up, it was about the lack of direction and adjustments that left all that work wasted.
Gets it into Boston. Hand off Mitchell. Indiana has to hurry. Lob back for Boston. Boston finishes. It's a 2-point game, 5.9 seconds remaining.
The truth is straightforward, Indiana didn't lose this because Washington was simply the superior team. They lost because they repeatedly handed away possessions, let the Mystics dictate tempo, and never found a counterpunch when the momentum shifted. This isn't new either, it's a pattern that has haunted the Fever all season long. Strong stretches of basketball suddenly melting into careless collapses. Every time it looks like the team is ready to take a step forward, unforced errors and missed coaching adjustments drag them right back down. But now, with the playoff race heating up and each game carrying weight, these recurring late-game breakdowns are becoming far more damaging.
Looking, finds Mitchell, launches a corner three, it won't go, rebound Ainxler, and this young Washington Mystics group who continues to impress throughout this season, and Sidney Johnson in his first year comes up with a big win on the road.
That naturally brings up the biggest question hanging over this game. Why was there no plan in place to steady things once the lead started slipping away? Everyone in the arena could feel the momentum shifting, but no effective counter ever came. Who was supposed to be responsible for calming the storm, making the right substitutions, calling the right sets, or delivering the adjustments needed? When those answers are examined, all signs point in one direction, and it's exactly where fans have turned their growing frustration.
I think we over-dribbled at times. Our off-ball movement wasn't there. We did a lot of standing. It's almost like we gave the ball to Kelsey and just tried to watch her work. And that's not when we're at our best. I mean, yes, certainly we want to have the ball in our hands, but we've got to continue to get movement with and without the basketball. It was getting stuck. I mean, we want to play 0.5 to 1 second basketball, and we weren't. And it's got to get moving.
Head coach Stephanie White's decisions are under the microscope, and none more than the complete absence of sharpshooter Chloe Bibby. Shooting 42% from deep this season, Bibby didn't log a single minute in a game where Indiana desperately needed floor spacing and outside shooting. When asked, White defended the choice, saying she worried Bibby's defensive matchups, rebounding, coverage responsibilities, and physicality would be exposed against Washington's lineups. But that explanation did little to ease fans' anger, especially when the Fever still surrendered 26 free throws, gave up wide-open threes, and watched Kiki dominate the paint regardless. The optics were clear, a proven floor spacer was left on the bench while the very defensive issues White feared still unfolded, leaving fans asking why an obvious solution went unused.
Tonight, were there thoughts maybe plugging her in to try and spark the offense a little bit, or what was the decision behind not playing her?
Yeah, there were some thoughts. I think that it matched up defensively more than anything with the way that we were going to try to play them, or in some of our switches and things like that. So that was mostly the reason.
And then just with the rotation, was it just those eight or seven that you ran with? Was it just they were flowing well and you wanted to just leave that going, or what was the thought there?
Yeah, I think some of it was defense. Being able to execute the type of defensive coverages that we wanted to have against this, the way that they.
White also admitted post-game that the offense was getting stuck, acknowledging that too often possessions boiled down to giving Kelsey Mitchell the ball and watching her try to create against multiple defenders. That admission, it was getting stuck, has now become the defining symbol of the night because it perfectly summed up what fans saw play out. When an offense devolves into predictable isolation basketball, the obvious fix is to spread the floor with shooters like Bibby. Instead, the Fever doubled down on Mitchell, forcing her to shoulder the burden alone. Predictability led to stagnation, and stagnation led to frustration.
I think it was something like a 22-7 run, the end of the second, beginning of the third quarter. And those are hard to recover from when anytime really, but when you're missing pieces. And, we've got to make sure that we're sharper at times. We don't have the margin to have lulls within quarters. And then I believe they had something like 21 points from free throw line and turnovers of their 26 in the fourth. And, we control that, defending without fouling. We control that, taking care of the basketball, decision-making at times. And some of it's, playing some people out of position, and some of it's just not being, valuing the basketball in the way that we need to value it, being a little sloppy with it.
The stat sheet reinforces the story. Mitchell finished 6-4-9 from the field, delivering 14 points along with 9 assists. She created opportunities, she competed, but she was asked to do far too much, both as a scorer and as the team's primary playmaker. In crunch time, multiple possessions ended with her driving into crowded lanes, taking tough contested shots, while perimeter shooters stood idle and unutilized. This isn't a criticism of Mitchell's decision-making, she performed admirably under heavy pressure, but it does expose how repetitive and predictable Indiana's sets became once Washington collapsed the paint against her. In the end, it wasn't a lack of effort from the players that doomed the Fever, it was the lack of a clear, adaptable game plan.
Screen coverages right now.
Here's Mitchell on the handoff, bounce pass, Boston one bounce and a left-handed finish. Here's Boston, the offensive rebound, flips inside to Howard who lays it in.
You go step up screen, flare on the weak side. They had to make sure they had the right shot clock time as well while they were reviewing that.
So Indiana with a 10-point lead here, 6 minutes until halftime as Boston finds some space and knocks it down.
What eats away at Fever fans isn't just the final score, but the glaring sense that Indiana undercut its own strengths throughout the game. This roster has tools, steady shooters, veteran toughness, and a dominant interior anchor in Aaliyah Boston, but the way rotations and offensive sets were drawn up often clogged those very weapons instead of unleashing them. Washington didn't come in and win this game behind a superstar explosion. They were simply rewarded because Indiana became predictable, relying on selective usage of their personnel and failing to maximize their options. That's why criticism hasn't been aimed at the effort level of the players, it's squarely aimed at the strategy. The Fever's athletes threw themselves into the contest, giving everything they had just to keep the score close. But when the coaching choices themselves are viewed as obstacles instead of solutions, momentum becomes harder to sustain, especially this late in the season where every mistake is magnified in the playoff race. The rotations raised serious questions, while the players kept pushing, refusing to let the night end without a fight.
Indiana with their work cut out for them here. 6-point deficit, just over 5 minutes left to play. Mitchell, feed inside. There's an easy two for Boston. Cunningham leans in, thought she'd throw the foul. Boston pulls down the rebound and lays it in.
The production was there from Indiana's leaders. Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, Sophie Cunningham, and Odyssey Sims each delivered the kind of effort that usually secures victories. Boston was a force in the paint, posting 20 points and 9 rebounds, constantly drawing Washington's defense to collapse whenever she got the ball. Mitchell shouldered dual responsibilities, finishing with 14 points and 9 assists, while also taking on the bulk of the playmaking when possessions broke down. Cunningham's box score read just 8 points, but it undersold her impact. She added 6 assists, 3 steals, and created a highlight moment when she intercepted a pass and immediately drilled a three-pointer. Meanwhile, Sims, barely into her second game with the team on a hardship contract, scored 11 points, aggressively attacked defenders, and provided something the Fever desperately needed, a true point guard presence to keep the offense functional.
Way inside.
What a pass by Melvin, too. Really nice.
Mitchell turns on the Jets and gets to the rim.
No one can keep Kemper as one of the best rebounders out of her area, which means the ball not directly above her head as Cunningham with a steal.
Cunningham feeds Sims, who goes coast to coast and lays it in. So 4 quick ones for Indiana.
Context matters, and that context can't be ignored. Indiana isn't just dealing with small setbacks, they're playing without their backcourt foundation. Caitlin Clark remains sidelined, and both Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald suffered season-ending injuries in the same week. That left Indiana scrambling, forced to sign players like Odyssey Sims and Grace Berger's replacement, Lambert, just to patch rotations and stabilize the roster. Stripped of reliable ball handlers and primary initiators, Indiana has had to improvise on the fly. The fact that they managed to hold control for as long as they did against Washington speaks volumes about the grit of the players still in uniform. Boston had to expand her workload inside, Mitchell carried twice the responsibility offensively, and Cunningham was pushed into a larger facilitator role, all while maintaining her defensive intensity. There were stretches where that grind and resilience were impossible to ignore. Boston's physical dominance inside kept the Fever steady during Washington's pushes, as she carved out deep post position, drew fouls, and either finished herself or kicked the ball to open teammates. Mitchell's aggressive drives forced defensive collapses that created open looks, even when her own shots didn't fall. Cunningham's steal entry sequence was the kind of momentum play that reignited energy across the roster, an emotional spark that doesn't always show in advanced stats but changes the atmosphere in real time. And Sims proved why her signing was necessary, as her ability to handle pressure and extend possessions kept the Fever from collapsing earlier. These moments, small as they may seem, represented the difference between Indiana completely folding and instead clawing their way into the closing minutes of the fourth quarter.
I think the thing that we just have to continue to do that kind of got us on the run we had before the last couple games was we were aggressive at the opponent attack on defense, and that led to easy transition buckets. That led to everyone being aggressive and on their front foot on the offensive end. And, we have new players, and that's okay, but, we just have to adjust, and we need them. We've faced a lot of adversity, but we should be used to that by now. And I think they can just kind of outwork this a little bit, and that just can't be ours.
That's the root of the frustration for fans. The team didn't lack production. Statistically, their leaders gave them enough to win. The Fever didn't lack fire. There were multiple energy plays that shifted momentum in their favor. What they lacked were the in-game adjustments necessary to channel those efforts into a closing plan capable of finishing off a struggling Mystics team. The box score shows that the players delivered. The film shows that the fight was there. But the gap between what the roster produced and how it was managed by the coaching staff is sharp, and it explains why fans left so frustrated. That divide was made even more obvious once the press conferences began. Sophie Cunningham spoke bluntly, demanding urgency and toughness, while Stephanie White leaned into familiar explanations. The contrast was stark. Cunningham didn't try to spin the truth. She admitted flatly that while the team has battled injuries, they must get back to being dogs. It wasn't a throwaway phrase. It was an acknowledgement that opponents no longer fear the Fever, treating them instead like a team to exploit. Her demand was clear: reclaim the edge, re-establish toughness, and stop making the same costly mistakes.
Really control the outside things. You can't control injuries, and so that's why you really do have to control your mental and control what you can control. And I think that we have a really good group. We're still a tight-knit group. We're adding new players in that are amazing. O's been around the league for a long time, and I know you don't think so, but it's a blessing that you were on another team because we need you here. And so I just think it's an adjustment period. The highs and lows, you just have to stay kind of steady, right? Every team faces it. I feel like we faced it more than most this year, but I think this is going to set us up for something good. I don't know if it's this season, I don't know if it's next season, but I think there's always something that you can be grateful for and learn during those hard times.
Now stack that against Stephanie White's words. The coach pointed to the offense getting stuck, again circling back to a recurring theme that possessions broke down into Kelsey Mitchell isolation plays. She also cited fouling as the decisive factor, noting that Indiana committed 21 total fouls, which sent Washington to the line for 26 attempts, including a jaw-dropping 14 free throws in the fourth quarter alone. On the surface, White wasn't wrong. Fouls hurt the Fever badly. But what stood out was what wasn't addressed: the choices that could have prevented the situation from unfolding in the first place.
The message inside the locker room, what were you guys talking about there after the game?
Yeah, I just think that we've had some hard injuries this year. We've had some different lineups and roster spots. And, to be frank, I don't think anyone else around the league thinks that we can do it anymore. But I think that our group does. And I think that we just have to get that confidence back. When we're clicking offensively, defensively, we're scary. And not a lot of teams can beat us, even with the roster that we have right now. And so for us, it's just remembering who we are. It's our identity. We got to get back to being dogs, got to get back to being aggressive, being on our front foot, and not allowing teams like this to come in here and outwork.
And that's where the core frustration lies. Identifying problems is one thing, but taking ownership of the in-game decisions that could have changed the outcome is another. Fans heard Cunningham speak about accountability and urgency in blunt, unfiltered terms. Then they heard White's analysis stop short of responsibility for adjustments that were under her control. Chloe Bibby's shooting, for example, could have provided the spacing to open up Mitchell's drives and reduce the need for her to force contested shots into traffic. Expanding rotations could have kept fresh legs on the floor, reducing fatigue-driven defensive lapses. Instead, the players kept grinding against the snowball effect, while the coaching staff explained afterward how it all fell apart.
Couple games where it feels like kind of that wear and tears taking a toll?
You know, not really. And I think that she kind of hit it. You have to give yourself a little bit of grace. You know, when you have so many different lineups, O and I have never played together. O hasn't played with a lot of people, maybe Tosh. But like, you have to know her style. She has to know our style. And so it's different, but that's part of being a pro. You got to adjust and you got to learn fast. And I think that's a really cool thing too, because when you click, you click. And so that's scary for people coming in here and trying to play us.
For the fan base, that dissonance cuts deeply. They watched Boston, Cunningham, and others step up and own their part in the collapse, only to then hear the coach offer broad explanations without direct accountability. Nobody expects perfection, especially when a roster is this thin at guard. But the expectation is that everyone, players and coaches alike, are pulling the rope in the same direction. When players show they're ready to carry the responsibility, but the coach frames the issues without addressing her own role in the breakdown, it sends the wrong message. Right now, Indiana's athletes are showing they're willing to fight and carry the load. But leadership, instead of matching that urgency, appears disconnected.
Sophie, till late in the third quarter, you guys were struggling offensively in that frame. Second half in general didn't feel the same as the first half on that end. Did something change for you guys? What did you see as kind of leading to stalling on that end?
Yeah, you know, I think we were just kind of slow. And every time that we're slow, especially defensively, it just somehow affects.
Which brings us to the bigger question: where does Indiana go from here? Should Stephanie White be held accountable for these decisions? Was this loss primarily about coaching tactics, the wave of injuries, or simply a roster stretched too thin to hold leads? Fans are already debating whether this was a strategy failure or an inevitable result of circumstances. But the overarching question looms even larger: should White be replaced, or should she be backed until the roster is whole again? This conversation isn't about one game, it's about the broader trajectory of the season. If the divide between player effort and leadership accountability continues uncorrected, holding on to playoff positioning becomes less likely with every passing week.